Hello, students. It is I, Mr. Weaver, and Mrs. Jackson. The two of us will be reading for you books 9, 10, 11, and 12 of the Odyssey. I'm going to start with book 9. Now, with these, we're not going to do a lot of explaining during the chapter. These are the adventure stories. They are pretty easy to understand if you pay attention. Odysseus and his men are going to go on various adventures. Now, before we get to that, Odysseus is still in Phaeacia, talking with Alcinous and Arte, and he is going to reveal here at the beginning of Book 9 who he really is, finally. He's been keeping that a secret his whole stay. And then, remember, this book, this entire epic is in medias res, meaning in the middle of things. So in this chapter, or this book, we finally get to go back into that flashback of Odysseus when he leaves Troy. Okay? Now, in this book, he is going to encounter several different places. One of them has to do with some drugs, so that'll be fun for some of you. One of them has to do with the Cyclops, who's a monster, and monsters are obviously an archetype going throughout all of literature, and there's various reasons for having monsters. You could discuss that with your teacher. Now, with this particular monster, we're going to see the epitome of inhospitality. Okay, instead of offering them food to eat, he's going to try to eat them. Okay, that's a sign that that's some pretty bad hospitality. So it's important that you see the kind of antithesis of hospitality with this guy named Polyphemus. He's a Cyclops. You're also going to see that Odysseus has his tragic flaw, the behavior, the evidence, the consequence of that in this particular chapter. And that flaw could be curiosity. You could also argue that it's just hubris, which is a fancy Greek way of saying pride, believing that you are better than everyone else, believing you're better than even the gods and that kind of a thing. So you're going to see that with Odysseus in this chapter, specifically towards the end. And those are kind of the big things in this book. Now I'm going to stop and I'm just going to read straight through, try to make it sound interesting, so make sure you follow along, and then Mrs. Jackson will get to book 10, and that'll be a fascinating chapter as well. So let's begin. And this book is called New Coasts and Poseidon's Son. But we start here in the hall of Alcinous. Now this was the reply Odysseus made to Alcinous. Alcinous, king and admiration of men, how beautiful this is to hear a minstrel gifted as yours. A god he might be singing. There is no boon in life more sweet, I say, than when a summer joy holds all the realm, and banqueters sit listening to a harper in a great hall, by rows of tables heaped with bread and roast meat, while a steward goes to dip up wine and brim your cups again. Here is the flower of life, it seems to me. But now you wish to know my cause for sorrow, and thereby give me cause for more. What shall I say first? What shall I keep until the end? The gods have tried me in 1,000 ways. But first my name, let that be known to you, and if I pull away from pitiless death, friendship will bind us, though my land lies far. I am Laertes' son, Odysseus. Men hold me formidable for guile in peace and war. This fame has gone abroad to the sky's rim. My home is on the peaked sea mark of Ithaca, under Mount Neon's wind-blown robe of leaves, inside of other islands, Dulichion, Sami, wooded Zacynthus. Ithaca being most lofty in that coastal sea in northwest, while the rest lie east and south. A rocky isle, but good for a boy's training. I shall not see on earth a place more dear, though I have been detained long by Calypso, loveliest among goddesses, who held me in her smooth caves to be her heart's delight, as Circe of Aea, the enchantress, desired me and detained me in her hall. But in my heart, I never gave consent. Now I will pause here. He's saying he never gave consent when he's making love with Calypso, and you're going to find out in chapter 10 with Circe. Now, can we believe him? Is he loyal? Is he faithful to his wife just because he physically is making love with this sea nymph and this witch, but he's saying in his heart he never gave consent? What then is loyalty? What then is faithfulness, if not physical? Is it just in one's heart? Maybe you should discuss that. Okay, I promise I won't stop very often. Where shall a man find sweetness to surpass his own home and his parents? In far lands he shall not, though he find a house of gold. What of my sailing, then, from Troy? What of those years of rough adventure weathered under Zeus? Here he's starting a story. The wind that carried us from Ilion brought me to Ismaros, on the far shore, a strong point on the coast of the Cicones. I stormed that place and killed the men who fought. Plunder we took, and we enslaved the women to make division, equal shares to all. But on the spot I told them, back, and quickly, out to sea again! My men were mutinous, fools on stores of wine. Sheep after sheep they butchered by the surf, and shambling cattle feasting, while fugitives went inland, running to call to arms the main force of Cicones. This was an army trained to fight on horseback, or, where the ground required, on foot. They came with dawn over that terrain like the leaves and blades of spring. So doom appeared to us, dark word of Zeus for us, our evil days. My men stood up and made a fight of it, backed on the ships with lances kept in play, from bright morning through the blaze of noon, holding our beach, although so far outnumbered. But when the sun passed toward unyoking time, then the Achaeans, one by one, gave way. 6 benches were left empty in every ship that evening when we pulled away from death. And this new grief we bore with us to sea. Our precious lives we had, but not our friends. No ship made sail next day until some shipmate had raised a cry 3 times for each poor ghost unfleshed by the Cicones on that field. Now Zeus, the lord of cloud, roused in the north a storm against the ships, and driving veils of squall, moved down like night on land and sea. The bows went plunging at the gust. Sails cracked and lashed out strips in the big wind. We saw death in that fury, dropped the yards, unshipped the oars, and pulled for the nearest lee. Then 2 long days and nights we lay offshore, worn out and sick at heart, tasting our grief, until a third dawn came with ringlets shining. Then we put up our masts, hauled sail, and rested, letting the steersman and the breeze take over. I might have made it safely home that time, but as I came around Malea, the current took me out to sea, and from the north a fresh gale drove me on, past Kythera. 9 days I drifted on the teeming sea before dangerous high winds. Upon the 10th we came to the coastline of the lotus eaters, who live upon that flower. We landed there to take on water. All ships' companies mustered alongside for the midday meal. Then I sent out 2 picked men and a runner to learn what race of men that land sustained. They fell in soon enough with lotus eaters, who showed no will to do us harm, only offering the sweet lotus to our friends. The lotus is a drug, folks. But those who ate this honeyed plant, the lotus, never cared to report, nor to return. They longed to stay forever, browsing on that native bloom, forgetful of their homeland. I drove them, all 3 wailing, to the ships, and tied them down under their rowing benches, and called the rest, "All hands aboard! Come, clear the beach, and no one taste the lotus, or you lose your hope of home." Filing into their places by the rowlocks, my oarsmen dipped their long oars in the surf, and we moved out again on our seafaring. In the next land we found were Cyclopses, giants, louts, with a law to bless them. In ignorance, leaving the fruitage of the earth in mystery to the immortal gods, they never plow nor sow by hand, nor till the ground, though grain. Wild berry and barley grows untended, and wine grapes in clusters ripen in heaven's rain. Cyclopses have no muster and no meeting, no consultation or old tribal ways, but each one dwells in his own mountain cave, dealing out rough justice to wife and child, indifferent to what the others do. Well then, across the wide bay from the mainland, there lies a desert island, not far out, but still not close inshore. Wild goats in hundreds breed there, and no human being comes upon the isle to startle them. No hunter of all who ever trekked with hounds through forests, or had rough going over mountain trails. The isle, unplanted and untilled, a wilderness, pastures goats alone. And this is why good ships like ours, with cheek paint at the bows, are far beyond the Cyclopses. No shipwright toils among them, shaping and building up symmetrical trim holes to hold the sea, and visit all the seaboard towns, as men do who go and come in commerce over water. This isle, seagoing folk would have annexed it and built their homesteads on it, all good land, fertile for every crop and season, lush, well-watered meads along the shore, vines in profusion, prairie, clear for the plow, where grain would grow chin-high by harvest time, and rich subsoil. The island cove is landlocked, so you need no hawsers out astern, bowstones or mooring. Run in and ride there till the day your crews chafe to be under sail, and a fair wind blows. You'll find good water flowing from a cavern through dusky poplars to the upper bay. Here we made harbor. Some god guided us that night, for we could barely see our bows in the dense fog around us, and no moonlight filtered through the overcast. No lookout, nobody saw the island dead ahead, nor even the great landward rolling billow that took us in. We found ourselves in shallows, keels grazing grazing shore, so furled our sails and disembarked where the low ripples broke. There on the beach we lay and slept till morning. When dawn spread out her fingertips of rose, we turned out marveling to tour the isle, while Zeus's shy nymphs' daughters flushed wild goats down from the heights, a breakfast for my men. We ran to fetch our hunting bows and long-shanked lances from the ships, and in 3 companies we took our shots. Heaven gave us game aplenty. For every one of the 12 ships in my squadron, 9 goats fell to be shared. My lot was 10. So there all day, until the sun went down, we made our feast on meat galore and wine from the ship, for our supply held out. So many jars were filled at Ismarus from stores of the Sicones that we plundered. We gazed, too, at Cyclops' land, so near. We saw their smoke, heard bleating from their flocks. But after sundown, in the gathering dusk, we slept again above the wash of ripples. When the young dawn with fingertips of rose came in the east, I called my men together and made a speech to them. Old shipmates, friends, the rest of you, stand by. I'll make the crossing in my own ship and with my own company, and find out what the mainland natives are, for they may be wild savages and lawless, or hospitable and God-fearing men. At this I went aboard and gave the word to cast off by the stern. My oarsmen followed, filing in to their benches by the rowlocks, and all in line dipped oars in the gray sea. As we rowed on and nearer to the mainland, at one end of the bay we saw a cavern yawning above the water, screened with laurel, and many rams and goats about the place inside a sheepfold, made from slabs of stone, earth fast between all trunks of pine and rugged towering oak trees. A prodigious man slept in this cave alone, and took his flocks to graze afield, remote from all companions, knowing none but savage ways. A brute so huge he seemed no man at all of those who eat good wheaten bread, but he seemed rather a shaggy mountain reared in solitude. We beached there, and I told the crew to stand by and keep watch over the ship. As for myself, I took my 12 best fighters and went ahead. I had a goat skin full of that sweet liquor that Eunthes' son, Meron, had given me. He kept Apollos' holy grove at Ismarus. For kindness we showed him there, and showed his wife and child. He gave me 7 shining golden talents perfectly formed, a solid silver wine bowl, and then this liquor, 12 two-handled jars of brandy, pure and fiery. Not a slave in Meron's household knew this drink. Only he, his wife, and the storeroom mistress knew, and they would put 1 cupful, ruby-colored, honey-smooth, in 20 more of water, but still the sweet scent hovered like a fume over the wine bowl. No man turned away when cups of this came round. A wineskinful I brought along, and victuals in a bag, for in my bones I knew some towering brute would be upon us soon, all outward power, a wild man, ignorant of civility. We climbed then, briskly, to the cave. But Cyclops had gone afield to pasture his fat sheep, so we looked round at everything inside. A drying rack that sagged with cheeses, pens crowded with lambs and kids, each in its class, firstlings apart from middlings, and the ewe-drops, or newborn lambkins, penned apart from both. And vessels full of whey were brimming there, bowls of earthenware, and pails for milking. My men came pressing round me, pleading, "Hey, why not take these cheeses, get them stowed, come back, throw open all the pens, and make a run for it? We'll drive the kids and lambs aboard. We'll say put out again on good salt water." Ah, how sound that was! Yet I refused. I wished to see the caveman, what he had to offer. No pretty sight, it turned out, for my friends. He's curious, guys. We lit a fire, burnt an offering, and took some cheese to eat, then sat in silence around the embers, waiting. When he came, he had a load of dry boughs on his shoulder to stoke his fire at supper time. He dumped it with a great crash into that hollow cave, and we all scattered fast to the far wall. Then over the broad cavern floor he ushered the ewes he meant to milk. He left his rams and he-goats in the yard outside and swung high overhead a slab of solid rock to close the cave. 24 four-wheeled wagons with heaving wagon teams could not have stirred the tonnage of that rock from where he wedged it over the door sill. Next, he took his seat and milked his bleeding ewes. A practice job he made of it, giving each ewe her suckling. Thickened his milk, then into curds and whey, sieved out curds to drip in withy baskets, and poured the whey to stand in bowls, cooling until he drank it for his supper. When all these chores were done, he poked the fire, heaping on brushwood. In the glare, he saw us. "Strangers," he said, "who are you, and where from? What brings you here by seaways, a fair traffic? Or are you wandering rogues who cast your lives like dice and ravage other folk by sea?" We felt a pressure on our hearts, in dread of that deep rumble and that mighty man. But all the same I spoke up in reply. "We are from Troy, Achaeans, blown off course by shifting gales on the great South Sea, homeward bound, but taking routes and ways uncommon, so the will of Zeus would have it. We served under Agamemnon, son of Atreus. The whole world knows what city he laid waste, what armies he destroyed. It was our luck to come here. Here we stand, beholden for your help, or any gifts you give, as custom is to honor strangers. We would entreat you, great sir. Have a care for the god's courtesy. Zeus will avenge the unoffending guest." He answered this from his brute chest, unmoved. "You are a ninny, or else you come from the other end of nowhere, telling me, mind the gods? We Cyclopses care not a whistle for your thundering Zeus or all the gods in bliss. We have more force by far. I would not let you go for fear of Zeus, you or your friends, unless I had a whim to. Tell me, where was it now you left your ship? Around the point, or down the shore, I wonder?" He thought he'd find out, but I saw through this, and answered with a ready lie. "My ship? Poseidon, Lord, who settles the earth a-tremble, broke it up on the rocks at your land's end. A wind from seaward served him, drove us there. We are survivors, these good men and I." Neither reply nor pity came from him, but in one stride he clutched at my companions and caught two in his hands like squirming puppies to beat their brains out, spattering the floor. Then he dismembered them and made his meal, gaping and crunching like a mountain lion. Everything, innards, flesh, and marrow bones. We cried aloud, lifting our hands to Zeus, powerless, looking on at this, appalled. But Cyclops went on filling up his belly with man flesh and great gulps of whey, then lay down like a mast among his sheep. My heart beat high now at the chance of action, and drawing the sharp sword from my hip, I went along his flank to stab him where the midriff holds the liver. I had touched the spot when sudden fear stayed me. If I killed him, we perished there as well, for we could never move his ponderous doorway slab aside. So we were left to groan and wait for morning. When the young dawn with fingertips of rose lit up the world, the Cyclops built a fire and milked his handsome ewes, all in due order, putting the sucklings to the mothers. Then, his chores being all dispatched, he caught another brace of men to make his breakfast, and whisked away his great door slab to let his sheep go through. But he, behind, reset the stone as one would cap a quiver. There was a din of whistling as the Cyclops rounded his flock to higher ground. Then stillness. And now I pondered how to hurt him worst, but if Athena granted what I prayed for. Here are the means, I thought, would serve my turn. A club or staff laid there among the fold, an olive tree felled, green, and left to season for Cyclops' hand. Here comes an epic simile. And it was like a mast, a lugger of 20 oars, broad in the beam, a deep sea-going craft might carry, so long, so big around it seemed. Now I chopped out a 6-foot section of this pole and set it down before my men, who scraped it, and when they had it smooth, I hewed again to make a stake with pointed end. I held this in the fire's heart and turned it, toughening it. then hid it well back in the cavern under one of the dung piles in profusion there. Now came the time to toss for it. Who ventured along with me? Whose hand could bear to thrust and grind that spike in Cyclops' eye when mild sleep had mastered him? As luck would have it, the men I would have chosen won the toss, 4 strong men, and I made 5 as captain. At evening came the shepherd with his flock, his woolly flock. The rams as well, this time entered the cave by some sheep-herding whim or a god's bidding. None were left outside. He hefted his great boulder into place and sat him down to milk the bleating ewes in proper order, put the lambs to suck, and swiftly ran through all his evening chores. Then he caught 2 more men and feasted on them. My moment was at hand, and I went forward, holding an ivy bowl of my dark drink, looking up, saying, "Cyclops, try some wine! Here's liquor to wash down your scraps of men. Taste it, and see the kind of drink we carried under our planks. I meant it for an offering if you would help us home. But you are mad, unbearable, a bloody monster. After this, will any other traveler come to see you?" He seized and drained the bowl, and it went down so fiery and smooth, he called for more. "Give me another, thank you, kindly. Tell me now, how are you called? I'll make a gift will please you. Even Cyclopses know the wine grapes grow out of grassland and loam in heaven's rain, but here's a bit of nectar and ambrosia." 3 bowls I brought him, and he poured them down. I saw the fuddle and flush come over him, and I sang out in cordial tones, "Cyclops, you ask my honorable name? Remember the gift you promised me, and I shall tell you. My name is Nobody. Mother, father, and friends, everyone calls me Nobody." And he said, "Nobody's my meat then after I eat his friends. Others come first. There's a noble gift now." Even as he spoke, he reeled and tumbled backward, his great head lolling to one side, and sleep took him like any creature. Drunk, hiccuping, he dribbled steams of liquor and bits of men. Now, by the gods, I drove my big hand spike deep in the embers, charring it again, and cheered my men along with battle talk to keep their courage up. No quitting now. The pike of olive, green though it had been, reddened and glowed as if about to catch. I drew it from the coals, and my 4 fellows gave me a hand, lugging it near the Cyclops as more than natural force nerved them. Straight forward they sprinted, lifted it, and rammed it deep in his crater eye, and I leaned on it, turning it as a shipwright turns the drill in planking, having men below to swift the 2-handled strap that spins it in the groove. So with our brand we bored that great eye socket, while blood ran out around the red-hot bar. Eyelid and lash were seared, the pierced ball hissed broiling, and the roots popped. In a smithy, one sees a white-hot axe head or an adze plunged and wrung in cold tubs, screeching steam. The way they make soft iron hail and hard, just so that eyeball hissed around the spike. The Cyclops bellowed, and the rock roared round him, and we fell back in fear. Clawing his face, he tugged the bloody spike out of his eye, threw it away, and his wild hands went groping. Then he set up a howl for Cyclopses who lived in caves on windy peaks nearby. Some heard him, and they came by diverse ways to clump round outside and call, "What ails you, Polyphemus? Why do you cry so sore in the starry night? You will not let us sleep. Sure no man's driving off your flock? No man has tricked you, ruined you?" Out of the cave the mammoth Polyphemus roared in answer, "Nobody! Nobody's tricked me! Nobody's ruined me!" To this rough shout they made a sage reply. "Ah, well, if nobody's played you foul, there in your lonely bed, we are no use in pain given by great Zeus. Let it be your father Poseidon, Lord, to whom you pray." So saying, they trailed away, and I was filled with laughter to see how like a charm the name deceived them. Now Cyclops, wheezing as the pain came on him, fumbled to wrench away the great door-stone that squatted in the breach with arms thrown wide for any silly beast or man who bolted, hoping somehow I might be such a fool. But I kept thinking how to win the game. Death sat there huge. How could we slip away? I drew on all my wits and ran through tactics, reasoning as a man will for dear life, until a trick came, and it pleased me well. The Cyclops' rams were handsome, fat, with heavy fleeces, a dark violet, 3 abreast, I tied them silently together, twining cords of willow from the ogre's bed, then slung a man under each middle one to ride there safely, shielded left and right, so 3 sheep could convey each man. I took the woolliest ram, the choicest of the flock, and hung myself under his kinky belly, pulled up tight, with fingers twisted deep in sheepskin ringlets for an iron grip. So, breathing hard, we waited until morning. When dawn spread out her fingertips of rose, the rams began to stir, moving for pasture, and peals of bleating echoed round the pens where dams with udders full called for a milking. Blinded and sick with pain from his head wound, the master stroked each ram, then let it pass. But my men, riding on the pectoral fleece, the giant's blind hands blundering never found. Last of them all, my ram, the leader, came, weighed by wool and me with my meditations. The Cyclops patted him, and then he said, "Sweet cousin ram, why lag behind the rest in the night cave? You never linger so, but graze before them all, and go afar to crop sweet grass, and take your stately way, leading among the streams, until at evening you run to be the first one in the fold. Why now so far behind? Can you be grieving over your master's eye? That carrion rogue and his accursed companions burn it out, when he had conquered all my wits with wine. Nobody will not get out alive, I swear. Oh, had you brain and voice to tell where he may be now, dodging all my fury." You realize how ironic this is, guys? "Bashed by this hand and bashed on this rock wall, his brains would strew the floor, and I should have rest from the outrage nobody worked upon me." He sent us into the open then. Close by I dropped and rolled clear of the ram's belly, going this way and that to untie the men. With many glances back, we rounded up his fat, stiff-legged sheep to take aboard and drove them down to where the good ship lay. We saw, as we came near, our fellows' faces shining. Then we saw them turn to grief, tallying those who had not fled from death. I hushed them, jerking head and eyebrows up, and in a low voice told them, "Load this herd, move fast, and put the ship's head toward the breakers." They all pitched in at loading, then embarked and struck their oars into the sea. Far out, as far offshore as shouted words would carry, I sent a few back to the adversary. "Oh, Cyclops! Would you feast on my companions? Puny am I in a caveman's hands? How do you like the beating we gave you, you damned cannibal? Eater of guests under your roof? Zeus and the gods have paid you!" The blinding thing in his doubled fury broke a hilltop in his hands and heaved it after us. Ahead of our black prow it struck and sank, whelmed in a spuming geyser, a giant wave that washed the ship's stern foremost back to shore. I got the longest boat hook out and stood fending us off, with furious nods to all to put their backs into a racing stroke. "Row, row, or perish!" So the long oars bent, kicking the foam sternward, making head until we drew away, and twice as far. Now, when I cupped my hands, I heard the crew in low voices protesting, "God's sake, Captain, why bait the beast again? Let him alone." This is actually good advice from his crew. "That tidal wave he made on the first throw all but beached us, all but stove us in. Give him our bearing with your trumpeting, you'll get the range and lob a boulder. You'll smash our timbers and our heads together." I would not heed them in my glorying spirit, but let my anger flare and yell. He's self-glorying. He has hubris right now, guys. This is his tragic flaw. Here he yells again. "Cyclops! If ever mortal man inquire how you were put to shame and blinded, tell him Odysseus, raider of cities, took your eye, Laertes' son, whose home's on Ithaca." At this he gave a mighty sob and rumbled, "Now comes the weird upon me spoken of old. A wizard, grand and wondrous, lived here, Telemachus, the son of Eurymachus. Great length of days he had in wizardry among the Cyclopses, and these things he foretold for time to come. My great eye lost, and at Odysseus' hands. Always I had in mind some giant, armed in giant force, would come against me here. But you, small, pitiful, and twiggy, you put me down with wine, you blinded me. Come back, Odysseus, and I'll treat you well, praying the god of earthquake to befriend you. His son I am, for he by his avowal fathered me, and if he will, he may heal me of this black wound. He I knew no other of the happy gods or mortal men. Few words I shouted in reply to him. If I could take your life, I would, and take your time away, and hurl you down to hell. The god of earthquake could not heal you there. At this, he stretched his hands out in his darkness toward the sky of stars and prayed Poseidon. So Polyphemus is going to pray to his daddy. Oh, hear me, Lord, blue girdler of the islands. If I am thine indeed, and thou art father, grant that Odysseus, raider of cities, never see his home, Laertes' son, I mean, who kept his hall on Ithaca. Should destiny intend that he shall see his roof again among his family in his fatherland, far be that day, and dark the years between. Let him lose all companions, and return under strange sail to bitter days at home. In these words he prayed, and the god heard him. Now he laid hands upon a bigger stone and wheeled around, titanic for the cast, to let it fly in the black-prowed vessel's track. But it fell short, just aft the steering oar, and whelming seas rose giant above the stone to bear us onward toward the island. There, as we ran in, we saw the squadron raiding, the trim ships drawn up side by side, and all our troubled friends who waited, looking seaward. We beached her, grinding keel in the soft sand, and waded in ourselves on the sandy beach. Then we unloaded all the Cyclops' flock to make division, share and share alike. Only my fighters voted that my ram, the prize of all, should go to me. I slew him by the seaside and burnt his long thigh bones to Zeus beyond the storm cloud, Cronus' son, who rules the world. But Zeus disdained my offering. Destruction for my ships he had in store, and death for those who sailed them, my companions. Now all day long, until the sun went down, we made our feast on mutton and sweet wine. Till after sunset in the gathering dark, we went to sleep above the wash of ripples. When the undong, the fingertips of rose touched the world, I roused the men, gave orders to man the ships, cast off the mooring lines, and filing in to sit beside the rowlocks, oarsmen in line dipped oars in the gray sea. So we moved out, sad in the vast offing, having our precious lives, but not our friends.